Good morning, everyone, and to our instructor, Ma'am Lovely Gandamon. I am Mary Apple Tumanlas, and today I'm going to report about the Filipino-American animosity in 1898 to 1902. The Filipino think that all the frustrations, bloodshed war, and slavery from the Spaniards was over. But they didn't know that there is another colonizers came, the American. Animosity is the other term of war. 1898 to 1902, in this era was the World War II. The American approached Aguinaldo in Hong Kong to persuade him to cooperate with Commodore Dewey to wrestle the power from the Spaniards. The informal alliance existed between Aguinaldo and Dewey to fight a common enemy at that time, the Spaniards. Therefore, a valid reason to say that there was a moral of legal basis for the Americans to treat Aguinaldo as an ally. But, surprisingly, what happened was the opposite. Because Aguinaldo and his comrades were treated shabbily. The American attitude was an explicit manifestation that they only used Aguinaldo as a mere instrument for them deceptive selfish interest. The American came to the Philippines pretending to be an ally, but actually a foe, masked deceivingly as a friend. The American policy in the Philippines was contained in markedly benevolent assimilation. This benevolent assimilation is a policy announced by U.S. President William McKinley in December 1898 that declared the United States intention to take control of the Philippines from the proclamation was instantly subjected to severe attack followed by verbal hasty and unfavorable criticism against the United States. Antonio Luna, editor of La Independencia or The Independence, commented that the proclamation was merely a subterfuge. This means that in order to achieve one's goal, they manipulated the people. Then Aguinaldo used a counter-proclamation letter on January 5, a part of the message which is read, "My government cannot remain indifferent in view of such a violent and aggressive seizure of a portion of its territory by a nation, which arrogated to itself the title of champion of oppressed nation. Thus it is that my government is disposed to open hostilities if the American troops attempt to take forcible possession of the Visayan Islands. I denounce these acts before the world, in order that the conscience of mankind may pronounce its infallible verdict as to who are the truth of raisers of nations and the tormentors of mankind." So, General Ilwil Otis of the United States Army think that Aguinaldo was angry in his speech and it was a tantamount to a declaration of war. So General Otis immediately deployed his American troops. With the tense of atmosphere, the Filipinos were advised to seek a safer place, while Aguinaldo gained the unwavering support from his Filipino people to fight back. The tension escalates. Aguinaldo tried to soften the entente between the American to strain the misunderstanding, because Aguinaldo was aware the conflict may arise with a powerful country which can be led into painful sacrifices of his people. And then they are having a conference to thresh out the adjustment of the political interest that they think can resolve the intensity of both parties. The American panels was determined to consider the Filipino as aspirations, but in reality their plan was to continue their plans of colonizing the Filipino. The American came to the Philippines not to tolerate the Filipino people, but being as imperialist, or they come here to take control over the country and its people to subjugate the Philippines. The incident in San Juan Bridge on February 4, 1899, arose because of the American soldier named Private Willie W. Grayson, who shot and killed a Filipino soldier who about to cross the bridge. The news of hostilities reached President Aguinaldo, and he immediately declared war to the United States. They really think war was the solution of that incident, or maybe they talked it and settled to avoid bloody a solution. Do you really think that Aguinaldo was right to declare war? The armed conflict erupted. General MacArthur bombarded Filipino lives with accuracy, causing many Filipino casualties. This battle happened at La Luma near Chinese Cemetery. A valiant Major Jose Torres Bogalion was mortally wounded. To avenge Bogalian's death, the Filipino defenders killed Major Mac Canville in Pandacan. In a fierce battle ensured American superiority in war and weaponry proved victorious. Meanwhile, General Luna, undaunted by his defeat, prepared a strategic plan to get back Manila, so his men set fire burning houses and created confusion in the enemy. Then the American troops rushed to the area and put the flames out, while Luna and his troops advanced, reaching Azgaraga, now Clara M. Recto Avenue, but the American fought back and repulsed him and his troops with heavy casualties. So Luna and his men hurriedly retreated to Pulo, now Valenzuela City in Bulacan. The American drive to the north. When the Filipino were back in Manila, the American soldiers under the command of MacArthur began their offensive with determined and continuous intensity. No one can stop the feeling of intensity of the American, because their primary goal was to seize Malolos, but the Filipino soldiers bravely put a defense to repulse the advancing American troops, but the Filipino soldiers were overwhelmed with the superior force of the enemy. They retreated and burned the towns of Pulo and Mikoyan and destroyed the bridges in order to delay the coming of the American reinforcements. General MacArthur captured Malolos on March 31, 1899, and Aguinaldo left Malolos and went to San Isidro Nueva Ecija to establish his headquarters there. General Ilwil Otis was jubilant when he learned about the fall of Malolos, because he believed that the Filipino resistance had been crushed, but he was wrong, because through this encounter the Filipino will become more determined to fight back and protect their territory until their last drop of their blood. General Lawton moved southward, capturing Las Piñas, Paranaque, Santa Cruz, and other towns in Laguna. The Americans were not always been victorious in the offensive thrust because Filipinos are repulsive. General Wheaton in Pulo killed Colonel Egbert, an American military officer. In April 23, the American cavalry under Major Ball suffered a defeat in the hands of General Del Pilar in Quingon, Naredel, Bulacan. Colonel Steichenberg was also killed while in the Battle of San Mateo, and General Lawton met his fatal end. In spite of these victories, the Filipino troops are poorly trained, lack of equipment, poorly fed, and lack of military knowledge. This could not turn the tide against the mighty enemy, the American. The resignation of Mabini. Mabini is the most powerful man behind Aguinaldo. Mabini persuaded the Filipino people to continue their battle for freedom, even the struggle and discrimination they suffered. But Mabini chose to stand for his beloved country, which is the Philippines. On April 15, 1899, at Isidro Nueva Ecija, Mabini said, "And since we is the last recourse that is left to us for the salvation of our country and our national honor, let us fight while a grain of strength is left to us. Let us acquit ourselves like men. Even though the lot of the present generation is conflict and sacrifice, it matters not whether we die in the midst at the end of our painful day's work. The generation to come, praying over our tombs, will shed for us tears of love and gratitude and not of bitter reproach." The Secretary of State John Hay informed the Kirkman Commission, authorizing it to offer autonomy to the Philippines government, but Mabini stood for independence. The Secretary of the State think that they can bribe Mabini, but they fail because Mabini chose to stood for the freedom. Pedro Paterno and other prominent members of the Morelos government wanted to accept the American offer of autonomy. These people are no shame for their country, but for me, we can't blame them because they struggle so much for them to achieve their goal, which is the independence. The influential members of the Filipino Assembly, formerly the Congress, passed a resolution to Aguinaldo asking to reject Mabini's position on the independence issue and replace him as president of the cabinet. On May 7, 1899, Aguinaldo informed Mabini of the formation of a new cabinet headed by Paterno. In response, Mabini congratulated Aguinaldo on his wise political decision. With Mabini's resignation, the executive arm of Aguinaldo government was reorganized. The assimilation of General Luna. General Antonio Luna was the best general of the Philippines Republic to fight the Americans at that time. He is the younger brother of the famous painter who painted the Spoliarium. He studied military science and strategy in Europe. He made many enemies because of his short temper. He slapped Felipe Bucanmeno, Aguinaldo's Secretary of Foreign Affairs, who disagreed with him. Luna was brilliant, and Aguinaldo appointed him to a high position in army. He instilled discipline in the army because he saw that the army had no discipline. But there is a particular soldier who disliked him. While he was in Bayambang, Pangasinan, inspecting the defense against the American, he received a telegram from Cabanatuan saying that he was wanted there. So he went there with Colonel Francisco Roman and some soldiers. On June 5, 1899, General Luna reached Aguinaldo's headquarters in Cabanatuan. He got angry. Then he heard a rifle shot, rushed downstairs, cursed the soldiers, and slapped one of them. A captain named Pedro Castilla from Cavite hacked Luna with a bulo. The other soldiers, seeing that he was wounded, started hacking him as well with their bulos, and some fired a gunshot at him. Luna drew his revolver, but he fell outside the convent and died, saying, "Cowards, assassin!" War continued in Visayas. General Otis ordered General Miller to bombard Iloilo and demanded the surrender of the city. But the Filipino troops, commanded by General Delgado, refused, and instead decided to fight. Delgado ordered the burning of the city to confuse the enemy and to prevent them from using it as a strategic place for operations. The city of Jar fell on February 20, followed by Santa Barbara on the 14th, Oton on the 19th, and Mandurriao on the 20th. The range of war continued. On February 2022, Cebu City was taken by the Americans, followed by Samar, Leyte, Masbate, Marinduque, Palawan, and other cities and provinces in the south on different dates. The hostilities in Mindanao. The United States military continued their offensive plans and strategies where two battles of American troops landed in Hulu on May 19, 1899 to bring Muslim Filipino of Sulu and other parts of Mindanao within the jurisdiction of American sovereignty. Meanwhile, the Filipino patriots in Zamboanga who were determined to defend their country and its interests at all cost, captured men with large piles of machine guns and rifles from the Spain gunboats in Basilan. In the provinces of Cotabato, Misamis, and Surigao, the Christian Filipinos also demonstrated their unwavering support and adherence of the Philippine independence. The Bates Treaty. The Bates Treaty means agreement. General John C. Bates negotiated with Sultan Hamulul Kiram II, by which the Muslims and Americans could coexist peacefully. The provisions of the agreement were: 1. The sovereignty of the United States over the whole archipelago of Hulu and its independencies is declared and acknowledged. 2. The rights and dignities of His Highness the Sultan and his datus shall be fully respected. And 3. The Muslims shall not be interfered with on account of their religion. And 4. That no one shall be persecuted on account of his beliefs. And last one, number 5, the domestic products of the archipelago of Hulu were carried on by the Sultan and his people within any part of the Philippines island, and when conducted under the American flag shall be free, limited, and free of duty. The American government agreed to pay the Sultan and his datos monthly in Mexican dollar. Guerrilla warfare. Guerrilla warfare is a small group or organization of which fought for their rights and dignity in our days. This is what we called rebelde. They didn't against the rules, but when this rule is not implemented accordingly, they fight back to it. General Aguinaldo took a personal command of the Filipino army. When General Luna died without professional or expertise of military discipline, the Filipino forces suffered heavy casualties. General Aguinaldo took a personal command of the Filipino army. When General Luna died without professional or expertise of military discipline, the Filipino forces suffered heavy casualties. So, this is the disadvantage of being commanded with no knowledge about military, but the Filipino troops employing guerrilla warfare were successful to a certain extent. Filipino women and the war. These are the women who involved during the war. Crescencia San Agustin de Santos served as a volunteer nurse. Trinidad Jackson was being a health services. Aguida Kahabagan, woman general of Laguna and one of recognition of her war exploits, and Teresa Magbuena for her military heroic deed. Aguinaldo fled to the mountains. Aguinaldo decided to running away from the advancing American troops, the ones to escape from being captured with his family, some member of his cabinet and military men. They hurriedly left Bayambang to board a train went to Calasiao. The Battle of Terad Pass. The Terad Pass is the battle of capturing the Filipino leader in order to resist from American rule, but in December 2, Aguinaldo and his comrades went to Terad Pass, and from the top of the pass, the Filipino troops fired their rifles at the enemies, but unfortunately, through Juanario Galot and Igorot he led the Americans and found a secret trail to the top. They using this opportunity to surprise General Del Pilar and his men to attack. During the brief encounter, Del Pilar was wounded and ordered to his men to slip away to avoid them from being captured. As Del Pilar ride his white horse, a shot rang out and the fatal bullet hit his neck. Major March found the diary of General Del Pilar, and in the diary written, "The General Aguinaldo has given me the pick of all the men that can be spared and ordered me to defend the pass. I realize what a terrible task has been given me, and yet I feel that this is most glorious moment of my life. What I do is done for my beloved country. No sacrifice can be too great." The capture of Aguinaldo after the fight at the Terad Pass, the American authorities lost track of Aguinaldo's whereabouts. The Americans started to conduct an extensive campaign of propaganda to win over the Filipinos to their side, and the prominent Filipinos like Cayetano Arellano, Pedro Paterno, Felipe Buencamino, Pardo de Tavera, and Benito Ligarda, they think that a better solution of peaceful existence could be reached under the Americans. These people are traitors. They believe that they gain peace under the Americans. They didn't know that the American only used them to gain their wants over the Philippines. General Frederick Faustin was secretly preparing the capture of Aguinaldo with the two former officers of the Filipino Army, Lazaro Segovia and Hilario Tal Placido, and some Macabebe scouts. They pretending that these American general and American troops are captives by them. Then Aguinaldo, without knowing the real interest of these people, he and his men are politely welcome and even serve them food, but unaware of what happened next. Colonel Simon Villa, fearing that Aguinaldo might be shot and killed, he bravely shielded Aguinaldo from the bullets, and Aguinaldo attempted to fight back by whipping his pistol, but Dr. Santiago Barcelona extensively held him by the arms and saying, "My general, you owe it to our people to live and continue fighting for freedom." General Faustin and his American companions entered the room and arrested General Aguinaldo in the name of the United. General Faustin and his American companions entered the room and arrested General Aguinaldo in the name of the United States government. Thereafter, Aguinaldo was brought to Manila on April 1 and was courteously received by General MacArthur and American officials, where he took his oath of allegiance to the United States government. Barbaric acts vis-a-vis war. The barbaric acts, this act is for brutality. Inhuman war is a phenomenon in the history of humanity. War is waged in order to obtain the political goals and to dominate. War is very destructive and its results cause too much pain and sufferings. One type of brutality in barbaric act was they called cure, which a man was forced to lie flat on his back and his mouth is forced open by a stick, and then water was poured into his mouth until his stomach expanded like a balloon. This was just one of the varieties of torture the Filipinos suffered in order to force them to reveal the movement and their strategies of the guerrillas. The end of the Filipino-American War. Do you really think that the suffering of the Filipinos are truly ended here? General Miguel Malvar took over the leadership of the Filipino government and relentlessly harassed the Americans by his guerrilla tactics and continued the hopeless fight. In summer, General Vicente Lucban and his troops ambushed American soldiers, killing and wounding them, the relentless offensive strategy and campaign of the Americans led to the capture of Lucban on February 27, 1902, and eventually resulted in the collapse of resistance in Samar. A few months later, the fiery and fearless General Malvar of Batangas finally surrendered to the American authorities in April 16, 1902. Even with the surrender of General Malvar and other revolutionary officers in Luzon, some patriotic Filipinos led by Macario Sakay continued the resistance movement and established a Tagalog Republic, with headquarters in Sierra Madre, where they eventually surrendered to the American army. It is interesting to note, especially among historians, that the capture of Aguinaldo ended an epochal period in the life of a nation, and at the same time opened another. Aguinaldo left behind him the enduring memories of a people determined to win freedom and independence at all costs through blood and tears.